Billionaire sees a black girl rummaging through his mailbox on Christmas night. The truth shocks him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. As the snowflakes danced in the cold winter night, the quiet streets of the upscale neighborhood seemed still, almost frozen in time. The homes, adorned with festive lights, gleamed with warmth and opulence. It was a stark contrast to the chill in the air, as if the world outside these mansions had been shut out. On the edge of this seemingly perfect world stood a small, fragile figure. A young black girl, no older than 7, her hair tangled and her clothes ragged, huddled near the ornate mailbox of a grand mansion. Her small hands trembled as she fumbled through the letters, the cold biting into her fingers, but she didn't seem to notice. She was looking for something. She had been there for what felt like hours, the festive cheer of the season lost on her as she desperately searched. Inside the mansion, billionaire Ethan Caldwell, known for his reclusive nature and his cold, calculated demeanor, sat by the fire, sipping his whiskey. The warmth of his luxurious home, filled with expensive furnishings and towering ceilings, contrasted sharply with the emptiness he felt inside. He looked out the window, his gaze catching the flicker of movement. He froze, his heart inexplicably racing. A girl, a small black girl, rummaging through his mailbox on Christmas Eve. His first instinct was to dismiss it. It wasn't uncommon for people to get curious about the wealth in this neighborhood, especially during the holidays. But something about her struck him. The way she moved, the desperation in her eyes, was unlike anything he had ever seen. He stood up, his curiosity pulling him toward the door, ignoring the nagging voice in his head that urged him to stay inside. As he stepped out into the cold night, the sound of his footsteps crunching on the snow broke the silence. The girl didn't notice him at first, too consumed by her search. But when she heard him approach, she froze, her small body stiffening. She looked up, and for a moment, their eyes locked. It was a fleeting glance, but something about it made his heart ache. The girl quickly lowered her gaze, but Ethan could see the fear in her eyes. She wasn't just some curious child. She was lost. And maybe, just maybe, she needed help. Without thinking, he took another step forward. "Hey," he called gently, trying to soften the tension that hung between them. "What are you looking for?" The girl didn't answer immediately. She hesitated, her hands still gripping the letters. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper, as if the words were too heavy for her to say. "I'm looking for a letter from my mom," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "She sent it a long time ago." Ethan felt his breath catch. There was something so raw in her voice, so full of hope, that it stopped him in his tracks. "Your mom?" he asked, trying to understand. The girl nodded, still not meeting his eyes. She promised she would send me a letter. But it's not here yet." Ethan's heart tightened. He had heard similar stories before. Stories of children waiting for a parent's return, for some kind of salvation, for a glimmer of hope in their lives. But this felt different. This wasn't just a story. This was real. As the wind howled around them, Ethan stood there, lost in thought. This wasn't just a chance encounter. This girl, this lost soul, had appeared on his doorstep for a reason. He couldn't explain it, but he knew he couldn't turn his back on her. Not now. Not when he saw the hope in her eyes. "I should have known better than to ask, but the words slipped out before I could stop them." "Your mom," Ethan Caldwell repeated, his voice barely above a whisper, as he took another cautious step toward the small girl. She was standing in the cold, holding a crumpled letter, her hands trembling slightly. She had been standing there for so long. He could feel the weight of her waiting. Her eyes, wide with hope, looked up at him, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to freeze around them. "She promised me," the girl said, her voice breaking her. Words so soft he almost didn't hear them over the wind. "She said she would send me a letter. It's been so long." Ethan's heart clenched at the vulnerability in her voice. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt that kind of hope, raw and unshakable. He stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. His thoughts were scattered, his mind trying to piece together what had just happened. This girl, this lost child, was standing in front of him, clutching a letter she believed would change her life. He wanted to help her, but how could he? How could he offer something to someone whose world seemed so broken, so far removed from his own? "Where are you staying?" Ethan finally asked, his voice steady, though his insides were anything but. The girl glanced up at him, her face momentarily shadowed by uncertainty. I don't know," she whispered. "I don't have anywhere else to go." Ethan's chest tightened as he looked at her. It was then that he realized just how deeply he had misjudged the situation. He had thought she was just another child lost in the streets, another face in the crowd. But this girl, this small black girl, was not just a stray child looking for a handout. She was someone who had been abandoned, someone who had been left behind by a world that didn't seem to care. He couldn't let her go. Not now, not after hearing those words. "Come inside," Ethan said, his voice softer this time. He didn't wait for her to respond, just turned and began walking toward the door. The girl hesitated for a moment, then followed. The warmth inside his home felt like a distant dream to her, a stark contrast to the cold she had endured. Ethan opened the door for her, and she stepped inside, her eyes wide as she took in the grandness of the house. It was all so foreign to her, the polished floors, the high ceilings, the soft lighting that made everything look so perfect, so out of reach. "What's your name?" Ethan asked as he closed the door behind her. The girl looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Anna," she said softly, her voice barely audible. "Anna," he repeated, a small smile tugging at his lips. "That's a beautiful name." The words felt hollow in his mouth, like an empty gesture in the face of the reality he had just witnessed. He led her to the kitchen, where a pot of soup sat simmering on the stove. "You must be hungry," he said, his tone warm, though he still couldn't quite shake the unease that lingered in his chest. Anna nodded, but she didn't speak. She sat down at the table, her small hands still clutching the letter. Ethan watched her for a moment, then moved to the counter to grab a bowl and spoon. He carefully ladled soup into the bowl and placed it in front of her. "Here," he said gently. "Eat. You need to stay strong." Anna picked up the spoon but didn't eat right away. Instead, she stared at the bowl, her fingers brushing the edge as if she wasn't sure if she was allowed to take it. "Is something wrong?" Ethan asked, his voice low. "No," she replied, shaking her head. I'm not used to this. I don't know how to accept things." Ethan nodded, understanding more than he wanted to. He sat down across from her, watching her carefully as she slowly began to eat. "Where's your family, Anna?" he asked after a while, his voice cautious. Anna's face fell, and she stopped eating for a moment. I don't know. My mom, she's sick. She told me to wait, but I haven't heard from her in a long time." The silence in the room was heavy, and Ethan could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him. This wasn't just about a letter. It was about a little girl who had been left to fend for herself. His thoughts swirled around the idea of what to do next. He knew he had to help her, but he wasn't sure how. He had no idea how to fix this. How do you fix a broken world for a child like Anna? "I'm here now," he said softly, trying to offer some comfort, though it felt so small. Anna looked up at him, her eyes wide and searching. "Will you help me find my mom?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan stared at her, the weight of her question sinking in. What could he say to that? How could he promise something so big, something that felt so impossible? And yet, as he looked at Anna, something inside him stirred. He had no answers, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't turn away. Not this time. "I will," he said quietly, a promise he wasn't sure he could keep, but one he would try to. "I don't know how long I've been waiting, but every minute felt like an eternity." Anna sat on the plush couch in Ethan's living room, her small frame almost swallowed up by the soft cushions. Her hands, still gripping the letter from her mother, rested in her lap. She had barely touched the soup he'd given her, her mind far away. Ethan stood by the window, his eyes tracing the soft glow of the Christmas lights outside, but his thoughts were elsewhere. The house, with all its warmth and luxury, felt more like a cage to him now. He had never been good with kids, never been able to handle emotions as well as some. Yet here he was, standing in front of this little girl who had no one. No family. No one to call her own. A weight settled in his chest. He had promised to help her, but what did that really mean? His world had always been black and white, built on rules and structure. He was the type of man who solved problems with money, who made decisions based on logic. But there was nothing logical about this situation. Anna was a puzzle he didn't know how to solve. "Do you want to go to bed?" Ethan finally asked, breaking the silence. His voice felt out of place in the stillness of the room. Anna shook her head. "I'm not tired," she whispered. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and vulnerable. "What if my mom never comes back?" The question hit him like a ton of bricks. He swallowed hard, not knowing how to respond. The idea that this little girl might never see her mother again was too much for him to bear. "I don't know," he said quietly. "But I promise, I won't let anything happen to you. Not as long as I can help it." Anna didn't respond. Instead, she stared at the letter in her hands, tracing the edges with her fingers. Ethan felt a pang of guilt. He had everything: money, a beautiful home, a successful career, and yet it all felt hollow when compared to what Anna had lost. "We'll figure this out," he added, though even he wasn't sure what this meant. The next morning, Ethan took Anna to the local hospital to check on her mother. The journey was long and quiet, with the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. As they arrived, Anna seemed to shrink into herself, her eyes scanning every corner of the hospital lobby like she was expecting something to go wrong. Ethan didn't understand it. He had always been in control of his life, his world. But here, with Anna, everything felt unpredictable, fragile. They waited in the sterile, quiet waiting room for what seemed like hours. Ethan tried to make small talk, but Anna remained quiet, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her coat. He couldn't help but notice how small she looked in the oversized jacket, her face pale and drawn. When the nurse finally called Anna's name, they stood up together, walking down a long hallway lined with rooms that all looked the same. As they entered the room where Anna's mother lay, the air grew thick with tension. Anna's mother, a thin woman with hollow eyes, lay on the bed, her breathing shallow. Ethan could see the signs of illness, the pale skin, the dark circles under her eyes. But it wasn't just the illness that caught his attention. It was the way Anna's mother seemed to retreat into herself as soon as they entered. She didn't smile, didn't even acknowledge them. Anna stood frozen at the door, her small body tense. "Mom," she whispered. Her mother's eyes flickered briefly in her direction, but there was no warmth in them, no recognition. "I'm here, Mom," Anna repeated, stepping forward slowly. Ethan stood back, watching the scene unfold. It was painful to witness. The woman's eyes, dull and distant, met Anna's, but they seemed to see nothing. "You're here," her mother whispered faintly, but her voice lacked any emotion. Anna reached for her hand, her small fingers trembling as she held on to the frail hand of the woman who was supposed to protect her. "I'm not going anywhere, Mom," she said quietly, though her voice cracked slightly. Ethan's chest tightened. He knew there was nothing he could say or do to fix this. There was nothing logical about the situation. He wanted to help, but how could he? The answers weren't clear, and for the first time in years, he felt utterly helpless. As the nurse entered the room to check on Anna's mother, Ethan stepped back, his mind racing. What was he supposed to do next? He had promised Anna he would help her, but he hadn't expected it to be like this. How do you fix a broken family? How do you heal a wound that runs so deep? For the rest of the day, Ethan and Anna stayed at the hospital, watching as her mother received treatment. Anna was quiet the entire time, barely saying a word, her eyes fixed on her mother. Ethan could feel the weight of her sadness pressing down on him, and for the first time, he understood what it meant to be responsible for someone other than yourself. He had never cared for anyone in this way before. He had always been alone, and while that was a choice, it was also a defense mechanism. But now, standing beside Anna, he realized that he could no longer be alone. He could no longer hide behind the walls he had so carefully built around himself. By the time they left the hospital, it was already evening. The Christmas lights that decorated the neighborhood sparkled in the distance, casting a soft glow over the streets. As they walked back to the car, Anna stopped for a moment, looking up at the sky. Ethan paused, waiting for her to speak. "Do you think she'll be okay?" Anna asked quietly, her voice barely audible. Ethan looked down at her, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but we'll do everything we can." Anna nodded, though it was clear she wasn't convinced. She wasn't sure if her mother would be okay, and neither was he. But as they got into the car and drove home, Ethan knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to give up on her. Not now. Not ever. I don't know how much longer I can do this, Ethan thought as he drove home. The sound of the tires crunching against the cold road the only noise filling the car. Anna had barely said a word since they left the hospital, her eyes lost in the reflection of the passing lights outside. He didn't blame her. He could see the worry written all over her face. It was clear that, no matter how many times he told her everything would be okay, she didn't believe it. She had been abandoned for too long to trust in promises. And here he was, a stranger to her, trying to offer the impossible. They arrived back at his mansion just as the evening settled in, the snow gently falling around them, coating the world in a soft, white blanket. The Christmas lights outside flickered, casting a warm glow through the windows. The contrast between the cold world outside and the warmth inside the mansion seemed surreal. Ethan pulled the car into the driveway, the house looming in front of them. It felt too big now, too empty. He glanced over at Anna, her small figure huddled in the seat next to him. She didn't move. "Come on," he said softly, turning off the engine. "Let's get inside and get you warm." Anna didn't respond right away. She stared out the window, lost in thought. Ethan sighed, knowing that there was only so much he could do. He couldn't fix everything. He couldn't make her mother's illness disappear, or change the fact that Anna had been left alone in the world for so long. But he could give her something. He could give her safety. He could give her a chance. He just hoped it was enough. They walked inside together, the warmth of the house enveloping them both. Anna glanced around the grand entryway, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and uncertainty. It's really big," she said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. Ethan smiled, trying to lighten the mood. "Yeah, it's a bit much for just me," he replied, trying to make a joke. "But I guess I'll have to get used to it." Anna didn't smile back. Instead, she turned toward the fireplace, the crackling sound of the logs burning filling the silence between them. She looked like she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. Ethan stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. "You can rest here for the night," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We'll figure things out tomorrow." Anna nodded, but still didn't speak. Ethan led her to one of the guest rooms, a large space with soft bedding and warm lighting. He set a blanket down on the bed, and Anna sat down on the edge. Looking around the room, her fingers traced the patterns on the quilt, her movements slow and deliberate. Ethan stood by the door, unsure of whether to say something more. He didn't want to overwhelm her, but he also didn't want her to feel alone. "You're safe here," he said, his voice quiet. "You don't have to worry about anything tonight." Anna finally looked up at him, her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite place. "Do you really mean it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan's heart tightened at the vulnerability in her voice. "Yes," he said firmly. "I mean it." He gave her a small smile, then turned to leave the room. "Good night, Anna." "Good night," she replied softly, her voice barely audible. Ethan closed the door behind him, leaning against it for a moment. He had promised her safety, but how long could he keep that promise? He didn't know the answer. All he knew was that he couldn't let her down. As he walked down the hallway, his mind wandered back to the events of the day, the visit to the hospital, the quiet sadness in Anna's eyes, the way her mother had barely reacted when she saw her. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. But what could he do? He had no idea how to fix this. He was a billionaire, yes, but that didn't make him a miracle worker. He couldn't cure illness, and he couldn't heal years of abandonment and neglect. But he could offer a hand. He could offer a chance. And for Anna, that was all he had to give. The next morning, Ethan woke up early, his mind restless as he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. He thought about Anna, about her mother, and about everything that had happened since they met. It felt like his life had shifted overnight, like the weight of the world had suddenly landed on his shoulders. He couldn't let it overwhelm him. He had to be strong, for her. For Anna. He got up and dressed quickly, then went downstairs to find her. She was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the food in front of her, but not eating. Ethan paused for a moment, watching her. "You okay?" he asked gently, stepping into the room. Anna looked up at him, her eyes a little cloudy, but she nodded. "I'm fine," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Just tired." Ethan could see through the words. He could see the fear, the uncertainty in her eyes. "I get it," he said, sitting down across from her. "You've been through a lot. But I want you to know, you're not alone. Not anymore." Anna didn't say anything, but her eyes softened slightly, and she picked up the spoon to take a bite of the food in front of her. Ethan watched her, feeling a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could make it through this. Together. I've never been good at this. At caring, at being there when someone needs me. But as the days passed, with Anna quietly settling into his home, Ethan found himself caught between two worlds. The world of certainty and control, the world he had built for himself, and the world of uncertainty that Anna had brought into his life. The noise in his head had stopped, replaced by something softer, but far more uncomfortable. One morning, as the sun crept through the windows of his expansive mansion, Ethan watched Anna sitting at the kitchen table, her small hands pushing around the half-eaten food on her plate. She hadn't been eating much lately, and he could see the hesitation in her eyes as she looked at the food, but never quite took the next bite. He had grown used to her quiet demeanor, the way she often retreated into herself. He wasn't sure what to do, but today felt different. He stood up from the counter where he had been making his coffee and walked over to her. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. Anna looked up at him, her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite name. She nodded, but the movement felt too mechanical, too practiced to be genuine. "I'm fine," she said, her voice small. Ethan took a seat across from her, the weight of the situation settling on him once more. He could feel it now, this unspoken tension that had been growing between them. Anna wasn't just a guest in his home. She was a child who had lost everything, and he couldn't pretend that he could just fix it. "Anna," he said slowly, his voice more serious now, "you don't have to pretend with me. I know you're scared. I can see it." She flinched at his words, but didn't look away. Her gaze dropped to the table as if the wooden surface held more answers than she was willing to give. "I'm not pretending," she whispered, but the tremor in her voice told another story. Ethan leaned forward, his eyes softening as he looked at her. "You don't have to do this alone," he said, his words genuine. "You're not alone anymore." Anna's eyes flickered up to meet his, and for a brief moment, something like relief passed over her face. Then it was gone, replaced by the familiar wall she had built to protect herself. She picked up the spoon again and pushed the food around on her plate, her mind somewhere else. Ethan sighed, leaning back in his chair, watching her. He had never been good at this. He didn't know how to fix what was broken inside her. He had money, power, control, but none of that mattered now. What mattered was Anna, and that was something he wasn't sure he could handle. But he had made her a promise, and he intended to keep it. "We'll get through this," he said, his voice low but firm. Anna didn't respond, but for the first time, she didn't push him away either. The silence between them stretched, but it wasn't as uncomfortable as it used to be. He had learned something over the past few days. Anna wasn't going to open up easily. She had been hurt too many times. But that didn't mean she didn't need someone. She needed someone who could show her that the world wasn't all bad, that there were still people out there who cared. Maybe, just maybe, she could trust him. It wasn't much, but it was something. "You know," Ethan said, trying to lighten the mood, "I used to hate Christmas." Anna looked up at him in surprise, her brows furrowing slightly. "You?" she asked, her voice almost incredulous. Ethan smiled, a small, sad smile. "Yeah," he replied. "I guess I thought it was just another day to spend money, buy things, and pretend everything was perfect. But now, it's kind of hard to ignore how much it means to people, how much it can mean if you let it." He watched her carefully, waiting for a response. Anna's gaze softened, and she gave a small nod, though it wasn't clear if she understood what he meant. "Do you like Christmas?" he asked, his voice a little quieter now. She didn't answer at first, and Ethan felt the tension rising again, unsure if she would shut him out. But after a long pause, she finally spoke. "I used to," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "When I was little, my mom, she used to make it special." Her eyes lowered to the plate in front of her again. "But it doesn't feel the same anymore." Ethan watched her, his heart aching for her. He knew that feeling all too well, the emptiness that came with loss. It was a feeling he had buried deep inside, not wanting to face it. But now, looking at Anna, he realized something. He couldn't fix everything for her. He couldn't erase her pain. But he could be here. He could offer her a place to heal. And that was a start. "Maybe we can make it special again," he said gently, hoping his words would reach her. Anna didn't look up, but for a brief moment, Ethan saw something flicker in her eyes. It was hope. The smallest spark, but it was there. He didn't expect everything to change overnight. But today, maybe today was a step in the right direction. Anna stood up suddenly, walking toward the window. She stood there for a long time, looking out at the snowy world beyond the glass. Ethan gave her space, knowing she wasn't ready to talk about her past. But he was here now, and that was all he could offer. "I'll make some hot chocolate," he said, standing up and heading toward the kitchen. "It's a Christmas tradition, right?" Anna turned slightly, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Yeah," she said softly, "I guess it is." Ethan smiled back, feeling a warmth spread through him. Maybe, just maybe, they could both start over. Together. I never imagined that one simple promise could change so much. Ethan woke up early the next morning, his mind already racing with thoughts of Anna. The house was still quiet, the kind of quiet that filled the space with an eerie stillness. The holidays were in full swing, the world outside covered in snow, but inside, things felt different now. Things had shifted. Ethan glanced over at the empty seat at the breakfast table, the same spot Anna had sat at. The night before, it felt as if the house was waiting for something. For a moment, Ethan considered just going back to his usual routine, but something told him that today wasn't going to be like any other day. As he made his coffee, he glanced over at the Christmas tree in the corner. It was beautiful, with its lights twinkling softly in the dim light of the morning. But somehow, it didn't feel as special as it once had. Maybe it was because he wasn't alone anymore, or maybe it was because Anna's presence in his life had made him realize how much he had been missing. He thought about her mother, about the woman who had raised Anna but was too sick to care for her now. Ethan knew that the little girl was living with the kind of pain that no child should have to carry. As he stood in the kitchen, waiting for the coffee to brew, he heard the sound of small footsteps approaching. He turned just in time to see Anna walking into the room, her hair still messy from sleep, but her face a little softer than it had been the day before. She paused in the doorway, her hands nervously gripping the edges of her worn hoodie. "Good morning," Ethan said, giving her a warm smile. She nodded but didn't say anything, still a little unsure of herself. "You hungry?" he asked, his voice gentle. She glanced at the food on the counter, then back at him. "A little," she replied, her voice still quiet. But there was something different in it now. Something that resembled hope, even if it was just a tiny spark. Ethan set a plate in front of her, a simple breakfast of toast, eggs, and bacon. He made himself a cup of coffee and sat across from her, watching her as she slowly began to eat. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It felt like a space they both had to fill in their own way, and maybe, just maybe, they could learn how to fill it together. After a few moments, Anna looked up from her food. "Do you really think my mom will get better?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's heart ached. He didn't know the answer. He didn't know how to fix what was broken in Anna's life, let alone what was wrong with her mother. But he couldn't lie to her either. "I don't know," he said softly, his eyes meeting hers. "But I promise you, I'll do everything I can to help." Anna's lips quivered, but she nodded, as if trying to convince herself that everything would be okay. Ethan watched her for a long moment, trying to find the right words to say. Finally, he spoke again. "You're not alone, Anna," he said, his voice firm, though there was a tremor in it. "I'm here for you, and I'm not going anywhere." For the first time since they met, Anna smiled, a small, hesitant smile, but it was a smile nonetheless. It wasn't much, but to Ethan, it meant everything. He wanted to promise her that everything would turn out fine, that her mother would recover, and that they would live happily ever after in this grand house. But that wasn't real life. That wasn't how the world worked. He had seen enough in his own life to know that things didn't always go the way you planned. Sometimes, people got hurt. Sometimes, things fell apart. But what mattered, he realized, was that you tried. You fought for the people who mattered, even if you didn't have all the answers. "We'll figure this out," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. "Together." Anna nodded again, this time a little more confidently. She didn't say anything, but the way she sat a little taller, the way her shoulders relaxed just slightly, told Ethan everything he needed to know. She was beginning to trust him, and that was enough for now. As the day wore on, Ethan found himself thinking about how much his life had changed in such a short amount of time. Anna had entered his world like a storm, shaking things up, forcing him to confront his own demons, his own emptiness. But for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. The house didn't feel so big anymore. and the silence wasn't so deafening. As they sat together in the living room later that afternoon, Ethan glanced over at Anna. She was staring out the window at the falling snow, her eyes distant but calm. It was hard to believe that just days ago, she had been rummaging through his mailbox, a lost, scared little girl looking for something she couldn't quite explain. Now she was here, in his home, safe. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan believed in the possibility of change. He didn't have all the answers, and he didn't know what the future would hold, but one thing was clear. He wasn't going to let Anna go through this alone. They still had a long way to go, but they were going to face it together. And that was more than either of them had ever had before. I was starting to think that things might actually be looking up, but then came the moment when everything changed. It was a quiet Saturday morning, a few days after Ethan had made his promise to Anna that everything would be all right. They had settled into a new rhythm at the house. Ethan had been trying his best to be there for Anna, taking her to school, helping her with her homework, and giving her space when she needed it. But no matter how much he tried to help, there was always something in the back of his mind, a nagging feeling that things weren't as simple as they seemed. That morning, as he sipped his coffee in the kitchen, Anna came down the stairs, her face unusually serious. She had been more distant than usual these past couple of days, her eyes constantly looking over her shoulder, as if expecting something to happen. "Morning, Anna," Ethan said with a smile, trying to ease the tension he felt. She nodded but didn't return his smile. Instead, she walked past him, her gaze lingering on the window as she peered out into the snowy yard. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked gently, putting his coffee cup down. Anna paused, her back turned to him. There was something in her posture, something that told him that this wasn't just another quiet morning. She was hiding something. "I'm fine," she said, her voice softer than usual. But Ethan could tell she wasn't. The way she clenched her fists, the way her eyes darted around, it was clear something was bothering her. He stood up, walking over to her. "Anna," he said, his voice firm but kind. "If something's wrong, you can talk to me." She hesitated, her fingers twitching as if she were going to say something, but then the moment passed. She turned to face him, her expression guarded. "I'm just tired," she said, her words barely above a whisper. "Tired of what?" Ethan asked, his voice tinged with concern. "I don't know," Anna replied, her voice breaking just slightly. "Everything, I guess. I don't want to keep bothering you. You've already done enough." Ethan took a step closer, his eyes softening as he reached out to gently touch her arm. "You're not bothering me. I told you. I'm here for you always." Anna looked up at him, her eyes welling up with tears. She quickly wiped them away, but the gesture didn't fool Ethan. He could see the pain in her eyes, the silent struggle she had been carrying. Before he could say anything else, there was a knock at the door. Ethan frowned, confused by the sudden interruption. He wasn't expecting anyone. He glanced at Anna, who seemed equally puzzled. "Wait here," he said, stepping toward the door. As he opened it, his heart sank. Standing in the doorway was a tall man, dressed in a suit that screamed authority. He looked out of place in the cozy neighborhood, and the serious expression on his face only added to the unease Ethan was already feeling. "Can I help you?" Ethan asked, trying to mask the discomfort he felt. The man stepped forward, his gaze scanning the house before landing on Ethan. "Mr. Caldwell?" he asked, his voice cold and professional. "I'm with Child Protective Services. I'm here to talk about Anna." The words hit Ethan like a ton of bricks. His heart raced, and for a moment, he couldn't find his voice. Anna had been living with him for only a few days, and already, someone from the government was showing up at his door? "What do you want with her?" Ethan asked, his tone sharp, though he could feel the panic creeping in. The man didn't flinch. "We've received reports of neglect," he said, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied Ethan. "We just need to speak with Anna. Make sure she's in a safe environment." Ethan's mind was spinning. He had done everything right. He had promised Anna that she would be safe, that he would protect her from everything. And now this. This was a threat he hadn't seen coming. "She's fine," Ethan said quickly, stepping in front of the man, trying to block his way. "She's safe here." The man raised an eyebrow, unfazed by Ethan's protective stance. "I'm sure you believe that, but I still need to speak with her." Ethan's mind raced. He needed to protect Anna, but how could he do that without making it worse? He turned to look back at the house, wondering if he could keep Anna hidden long enough to get this man to leave. But then he saw her. Anna was standing at the top of the stairs, her eyes wide with fear. She had heard everything. And in that moment, Ethan realized just how powerless he was. He could shelter her in his home, but he couldn't protect her from the world outside. Anna slowly walked down the stairs, her expression unreadable. She stopped in front of Ethan, her small hands trembling slightly. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice shaky. Ethan looked at her, his heart breaking. "It's okay," he said softly, trying to reassure her. "They just need to talk to you for a minute." But Anna could see the fear in his eyes, and she didn't believe him. "What do they want with me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man stepped forward, his eyes softening for the first time. "We just want to make sure you're all right, Anna," he said, his tone almost kind. "We're here to help." Ethan wanted to protest, to tell him that Anna didn't need any help, but something about the man's presence made him hesitate. Anna looked from the man to Ethan, her eyes searching his face for any sign of reassurance. But all Ethan could do was nod. "It's okay," he said again, though he didn't believe it himself. "They're just going to ask you a few questions. It's nothing to worry about." Anna hesitated, then nodded slowly, her shoulders slumping as she walked past Ethan and toward the man. Ethan's heart ached as he watched her, the weight of the situation sinking in. He had made a promise to protect her, but now he wasn't sure if he could keep it. Not with everything that was happening. Not with the world closing in around them. "I never thought I'd be in this situation." As the social worker from Child Protective Services stepped inside, Ethan felt the walls of his home close in around him. Anna, standing just behind him, was trying to make herself as small as possible, her shoulders hunched, her eyes flickering nervously. Ethan could see the tension in her every movement, the way she was trying to brace herself for whatever was about to happen. The man, whose name was Mr. Daniels, was polite, his tone measured, but there was no mistaking the authority behind his words. "Mr. Caldwell, I just need to ask Anna a few questions," he said, his gaze briefly flickering toward Anna. "It won't take long. We just want to make sure she's in a safe environment." Ethan clenched his fists, trying to keep his composure. "I've already told you she's fine here," he said, his voice tight. "Anna is safe." Mr. Daniels nodded, his expression neutral. "I understand your concern, Mr. Caldwell. I'm just doing my job." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. He had taken Anna in, promised her she would be safe, that she could start over. But now, it felt like everything was unraveling. Anna wasn't a threat. She wasn't some troubled child who needed to be rescued. She had been through enough. She just needed someone to care. "Can we speak with her?" Mr. Daniels asked, his voice firm but not unkind. Ethan turned to Anna, his eyes softening. "It's okay, Anna," he said, trying to offer reassurance. "You don't have to be scared. This is just a formality. They just need to make sure you're okay." Anna didn't look convinced, her eyes darting between Ethan and the man standing in their living room. She bit her lip, her fingers twisting the hem of her sleeve. Ethan could see how much she was holding back, how hard it was for her to trust anyone. "It'll be fine," he added, his voice gentle but firm. "I'll be right here." Anna hesitated for a moment, then slowly nodded. She stepped forward, her small figure casting a shadow in the dimly lit hallway. Ethan stood close behind her, his presence a silent promise that he wouldn't let anyone take her away. Mr. Daniels motioned toward the sitting area in the next room, gesturing for Anna to sit. She hesitated again, but eventually lowered herself onto the couch. Ethan sat down beside her, his body stiff with tension. "Anna, I'm going to ask you a few questions," Mr. Daniels began, his voice calm but authoritative. "You don't have to. Answer if you don't want to, but I need to make sure you're safe. Can you tell me what's been going on at home?" Anna's hands were clenched in her lap, her fingers tight as she looked down at them. Ethan watched her, his heart aching. He could feel the weight of the question hanging in the air. How could he protect her when the system itself felt like a barrier? Anna stayed silent for a long time, and Ethan could see the internal battle playing out on her face. She was reluctant to speak, reluctant to relive the things she had already gone through. But then she took a shaky breath, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My mom, she's sick. She can't take care of me. She said I had to wait for her to get better. But she didn't get better." Ethan's chest tightened as he listened. He could see how much pain Anna was in, how much she had carried on her own, how many children had to bear the weight of their parents' failures. How many children had to fight through the world alone? Mr. Daniels nodded, his expression unchanged. And where have you been staying, Anna? He asked, his voice gentle but persistent. Who's been taking care of you? Anna glanced up at Ethan, and for a moment, their eyes locked. It was a silent exchange, one full of unspoken trust, one full of the promise Ethan had made to her. I've been staying with Mr. Caldwell, Anna said, her voice a little stronger now, though still trembling. He's been helping me. Mr. Daniels looked at Ethan, his gaze scrutinizing. And how long has she been living here? He asked, his tone neutral but calculating. Ethan felt a pang of frustration. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He was trying to help her. A few days, Ethan replied, his voice clipped. I'm doing everything I can to make sure she's safe. The room fell silent for a moment. Ethan could hear the clock ticking in the background, the seconds dragging by, each one feeling like an eternity. Mr. Daniels finally spoke again, his tone softer. I can see that you care about her, Mr. Caldwell, he said, his voice more understanding. But the system has its rules. I have to be sure she's in the right place. Ethan nodded, his jaw tightening. He understood the rules. He had followed the rules his whole life. But this wasn't about rules. This was about Anna, about protecting her from a world that had already hurt her too much. She's safe here, Ethan said again, his voice steady. I'm not going to let anything happen to her. Mr. Daniels glanced at Anna, then back at Ethan. I believe you, he said, his voice quiet. But I still need to make a report. It's just procedure. Ethan nodded, though he felt a knot form in his stomach. It wasn't just procedure. It was an obstacle, one he had to get past in order to keep his promise to Anna. As the conversation continued, Ethan's mind raced. How could he keep her safe when the system was constantly threatening to pull her away? How could he protect her from a world that didn't seem to care? But one thing was clear. He wasn't going to stop. Not now. Not ever. Anna deserved more than this. She deserved a chance, and Ethan was going to make sure she got it. The conversation ended after a while, Mr. Daniels finishing his questions. He stood up, nodding to both Ethan and Anna. I'll be in touch, he said, his tone still neutral, but his eyes softening ever so slightly. Ethan walked him to the door, his mind still reeling. As he closed the door behind the man, he turned back to Anna, who was still sitting quietly on the couch. She looked up at him, her face full of uncertainty. Are we okay? She asked, her voice small. Ethan walked over to her, sitting down beside her once again. We're more than okay, he said, his voice steady, though his heart still raced. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Anna looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly, her eyes softening just a little. For the first time, Ethan saw a flicker of trust in her eyes. And in that moment, he knew that, no matter what happened, they would face it together. I had no idea how fast things could change. 1 minute, I was trying to figure out how to make Anna feel safe in this new world, and the next, everything was slipping through my fingers. After Mr. Daniels left, I thought maybe we could catch a break. I thought maybe the worst was over. But I couldn't have been more wrong. It had only just begun. The morning after the visit from Child Protective Services, things felt off. Anna was quiet, her eyes hollow, and I couldn't tell if it was the pressure of the visit or something deeper. I watched her try to eat breakfast, her fork slowly pushing food around her plate, but she never actually took a bite. I knew something was wrong. She hadn't said much since the social worker left, but the weight of her silence spoke louder than anything else. The guilt from the day before was still hanging over us, and I didn't know how to fix it. I was supposed to be the one to protect her, but now the system was threatening to tear everything apart. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't. I cleared my throat, trying to break the tension in the air. Anna, I said gently, do you want to talk about yesterday? She looked up, and for a split second, I saw the walls she'd built up around herself crack just a little. But they quickly went back up as she turned away, her eyes focusing on the window. There's nothing to talk about, she whispered. The words felt like a punch in the gut. I wanted to argue, to say that of course there was something to talk about, but I knew better than to push her too hard. She wasn't ready to talk, and pushing would only make her retreat further. So, I did what I had to do, I gave her space. The days following that morning were a blur. I tried to maintain some sense of normalcy, keeping up with work, taking Anna to school, making sure she had everything she needed. But nothing felt normal. Every time I looked at her, I saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the worry that hadn't been there before. And every time I tried to reach out, she pulled away a little more. That's when I realized I had to make a choice. I could keep living in this constant state of uncertainty, hoping things would fix themselves, or I could take action. I wasn't a person who liked to wait for things to happen. I was used to making things happen. But this wasn't a business deal or a stock market plunge. This was Anna's life. And I had to be careful. One afternoon, after picking her up from school, I noticed something strange. As we were walking to the car, I saw a man standing at the gate of the property. He was well dressed, with a serious expression, and there was something about the way he stood there that made me uneasy. Anna noticed him too. She froze for a moment, her hand tightening around mine, and then she quickly looked away, as if trying to pretend he wasn't there. I could tell she recognized him, but she didn't say anything. The man didn't move as we approached. "Mr. Caldwell?" he asked, his voice smooth but firm. I stopped in my tracks, my heart racing. "Yes," I replied, my mind already running through the possibilities. "I'm Detective Harris," he said, flashing a badge that seemed to make everything feel even more official. "I'm investigating a case involving Anna." My stomach dropped. This was exactly what I had feared. The last thing I wanted was for Anna to get caught up in some police investigation. "I'm sorry," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "but I don't understand." "What case?" Harris looked at me, his expression unreadable. "It's related to her mother," he explained. "We're looking into some serious matters, and we need to speak with Anna." I felt Anna's grip tighten on my hand, and I could tell she was terrified. She didn't want to be involved in any of this, and the last thing I wanted was to drag her further into something that was beyond her control. "Anna doesn't need to speak with anyone," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Harris raised an eyebrow, clearly not intimidated. "I'm afraid that's not how this works, Mr. Caldwell. We need to follow protocol." I felt my frustration rising, but I knew I couldn't let it show. I turned to Anna, who had barely looked up since we'd approached the gate. "Anna," I said softly, "you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. We'll figure this out together, okay?" She didn't respond right away, but after a long pause, she nodded. Her eyes were filled with so much fear, and in that moment, I realized how much weight she had been carrying on her small shoulders. Detective Harris was still standing there, waiting for a response. I took a deep breath and faced him. "I'll have her speak with you," I said reluctantly. "But I'm coming with her." Harris didn't argue. "Of course," he said, his tone almost patronizing. "We just need some answers, Mr. Caldwell." I walked with Anna and the detective toward the small office at the back of the house. It was a room I had never used, a room that felt out of place in the sleek, polished home I had built for myself. It was small, cluttered with old furniture and paperwork from years of neglect. I could see Anna's eyes flickering nervously as we entered. "You're not alone, Anna," I said softly, standing beside her as she sat down across from Harris. The detective began asking questions, but I stayed quiet, watching Anna closely. Her answers were short and hesitant. She didn't want to be here. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands fidgeted in her lap. But there was something else there too, something in her eyes. Something that said she was trying to fight through the fear, trying to push past the walls she'd built up. I could tell she was holding back, but she was still here. She was still fighting. And for the first time in days, I saw a flicker of strength in her. Maybe, just maybe, we weren't as broken as we felt. Maybe, just maybe, we could still fix this. The questioning went on for what felt like hours, but eventually Harris stood up, giving us a polite nod. "Thank you, Anna," he said. "You've been very cooperative." Anna didn't respond, but her shoulders slumped in relief as he left the room. I walked over to her, kneeling down in front of her. "You did great," I said, my voice soft. She looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want to talk to him." I shook my head. "You don't have to apologize for anything. You did what you had to do, and I'll always be here, no matter what." She nodded, a small smile forming on her face. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give me hope. Maybe the worst was behind us. Maybe we could finally move forward. Together. I sat next to Anna in the living room, the weight of the conversation from earlier still hanging heavily in. The air, the visit from the social worker, the tension, the questions, it had all taken a toll on her. Her eyes were quieter now, distant, as if she were trying to process everything at once. I could see the exhaustion in her face, the subtle way her shoulders sagged, but she hadn't said a word since Detective Harris had left. She was holding herself together, but just barely. Do you want to talk about it? I asked softly, my voice low, careful not to push too hard. Anna didn't look at me at first. She was staring at the fireplace, her fingers fiddling with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. I could tell she was thinking, trying to find the right words, or maybe, more likely, figuring out whether it was even worth saying anything. I don't know what to say, she finally whispered, her voice small, fragile. I could hear the frustration in her words, the helplessness that she was trying so hard to suppress. I leaned forward, trying to offer her the comfort I knew she needed. You don't have to say anything you're not ready for, I said. But you can talk to me whenever you want. You don't have to carry this alone, Anna. She glanced at me then, her eyes wet but determined. There was so much I could see in them. The fear, the pain, but also the tiniest glimmer of trust. She was starting to let me in. Slowly, so slowly, but it was happening. She took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling with the effort, as if preparing to say something difficult. I just don't want to lose everything, she said, her voice cracking, the words slipping out like they had been trapped inside her for too long. My heart broke hearing her say that. You're not going to lose anything, Anna, I said immediately, reaching out to gently touch her hand. I'm here for you. You're not alone anymore. I won't let you lose anything. She didn't pull away, and for a moment, I thought maybe she believed me. But then she looked down at her lap, her shoulders tense once again. I don't know, she said, shaking her head. What if I'm not enough? What if I'm too much? I could feel the weight of her words, the deep sense of worthlessness she carried, as if she were the problem, as if she didn't deserve any of this, the help, the care, the promise I had made. It was so clear to me now how much she had been carrying alone for so long. You're enough, I said firmly, squeezing her hand. You've always been enough. Anna's eyes lifted to meet mine again, and I saw a flicker of something. Hope, maybe even a little belief. But it was quickly replaced with uncertainty, as if she was still trying to figure out if it was safe to trust me, if it was safe to believe that someone actually cared enough to stick around. I don't know if I can ever be what you want me to be, she whispered, her voice barely audible. The vulnerability in her words hit me hard. I leaned back in my seat, trying to think of what to say next. What do you say to a child who feels like they've failed, when all they really need is someone to tell them they haven't? Anna, I don't want you to be anything other than who you are, I said, my voice gentle but firm. You don't have to prove anything to me. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm just asking you to be here, to let me help. That's all. She didn't respond right away, but I saw the tension in her shoulders start to ease just a little. She wasn't ready to let go of all her fears, but I could tell she was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could. You don't have to do everything on your own, I continued, my words a quiet plea. You've been carrying this weight for so long, and I can see it. But you don't have to do it alone anymore. I stood up then, not wanting to overwhelm her, but knowing I had to do something, anything, to show her that she wasn't alone. I went over to the window and looked out at the snowy yard, the same scene I had seen countless times before. But this time, it felt different. The world outside felt colder, emptier, but I could feel something shifting inside the house. There was warmth now, not just from the fire but from the bond one was starting to build with Anna. It wasn't perfect, and it wouldn't be easy, but we were both learning to trust each other, to understand each other's fears. It wasn't going to happen overnight, but this was the beginning. As I stood there, I realized that no matter what happened with the system, no matter how many obstacles came our way, I wasn't going to let Anna face them alone. I would fight for her. I would fight to keep her safe, no matter what. I turned back to Anna, who was still sitting on the couch, her head tilted slightly, her eyes following me. I don't want to go back to the way things were, she said quietly, her voice full of determination. I smiled, walking back over to her and sitting down beside her. You won't have to, I said, my heart swelling with something I couldn't quite name. We'll figure this out together. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a genuine smile tug at the corners of her lips. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was enough to remind me that even in the hardest of times, there was still hope. There was still a chance for change. And for the first time, I believed it too. We were going to be okay. Together. I thought I had prepared for every possibility, but nothing could have prepared me for the phone call I received that afternoon. I had just finished putting together dinner for Anna and myself, trying to stick to some semblance of normalcy, when the phone rang. I glanced at the screen and saw a number I didn't recognize. My heart skipped a beat. I picked it up quickly. Mr. Caldwell? The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, but there was something about it that immediately put me on edge. Yes, I replied, trying to keep my tone steady. This is Detective Harris. I'm calling regarding the case involving Anna. My breath caught. I had been expecting this, but hearing it in reality made the situation feel even more real. What is it? I asked, my voice tight. We've uncovered some new information, Detective Harris continued, his voice low and serious. There's more to Anna's situation than we initially thought. I felt a chill run down my spine. I had known something wasn't right. This whole thing was bigger than I had imagined, but I hadn't been prepared for it to escalate this quickly. What do you mean? I asked, trying to keep my composure. I can't go into details over the phone, but I need you to meet me at the precinct. It's about Anna's mother. We need to talk. My mind was racing, and for a moment, I was too stunned to respond. Is she okay? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I feared the worst. Finally, Harris spoke again, his voice steady but filled with an edge of concern. I think you need to hear this in person, Mr. Caldwell. It's important. I didn't hesitate. I hung up the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. The moment I had been dreading. I had promised Anna I would protect her, that I would be there for her no matter what. But now, I had no idea what I was about to walk into. I had no idea what this new information was, or how it would change everything. I grabbed my coat and rushed out the door, the cold air hitting me like a slap in the face. The drive to the precinct felt like it took forever. I was desperate for answers, desperate to know what was happening. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to make sense of it. What had they uncovered? What did it mean for Anna? By the time I arrived, my mind was in a frenzy. I walked into the precinct, my nerves on edge. Harris was waiting for me in a small, sterile room, his arms folded across his chest. He looked up when I walked in, his face impassive, but there was something in his eyes that made me uneasy. Mr. Caldwell, he said, nodding as I entered. Please, have a seat. I did as he asked, my mind still racing. What's going on? I asked, my voice barely controlled. Harris took a deep breath, as if preparing himself for what he was about to say. There's more to Anna's mother's illness than we realized, he began, his voice steady but grim. We've uncovered some evidence that suggests foul play. It's not just a case of sickness, Mr. Caldwell. There are signs that her condition might have been caused intentionally. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. What do you mean? I asked, barely able to process what he was saying. Harris looked at me, his gaze hardening. We believe Anna's mother was poisoned, he said bluntly, and we think someone close to her might have been responsible. I felt my blood run cold. Poisoned? The idea seemed impossible. It didn't make sense. Who would do something like that to a mother? Who would hurt Anna like that? Are you saying someone in her family did this? I asked, my voice shaking with disbelief. Harris nodded. We're still gathering information, but we believe that Anna's mother might have been targeted. And that's why Anna is at the center of this investigation. My mind was spinning. This wasn't just about a child's custody anymore. This was about a conspiracy, a crime, and Anna was caught in the middle of it. What does this mean for her? I asked, my voice desperate. Harris met my gaze, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read. It means that Anna might be in more danger than we thought. Whoever did this, they're still out there. And we need to make sure Anna is protected. The weight of his words hit me like a wave. I had known the system was flawed, but I never expected it to involve something like this. Anna wasn't just a victim of neglect. She was a victim of something much darker, something I wasn't sure I was prepared to face. I had to protect her. That was all that mattered now. What can I do? I asked, my voice a little firmer now. Harris sighed, as if he had expected that question. For now, we need to keep Anna close. We need to make sure she's safe, but we also need to keep a low profile. We don't know who is involved in this, but they could be watching her. I nodded, my mind racing with possibilities. I had to figure out how to keep Anna safe, how to protect her from whoever was responsible for her mother's condition. I couldn't let anyone hurt her again. As I left the precinct, my thoughts were a blur. There was so much I needed to process, so many questions I had that didn't have answers yet. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going to let this go. I had promised Anna I would protect her, and I would. Keep that promise no matter what. I would fight for her. And whatever it took, I would make sure she was safe. No matter what came next, I was ready. Because Anna deserved to know that she had someone in her corner. Someone who wouldn't back down. Someone who would fight to keep her safe. And that person was me. I wasn't sure what to expect when I walked into the precinct the next morning, but I knew something was off. The usual hum of activity, the typical rush of officers and civilians, was replaced with an eerie stillness. The lights above flickered, and the air felt colder than usual. I walked to the desk, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. The officer behind the counter looked up as I approached. "Mr. Caldwell, they're expecting you," he said, his voice businesslike but laced with an undercurrent of uncertainty. "This way." As he led me down the hallway, I could feel the weight of what had happened the day before still pressing on me. Anna's situation had gone from bad to worse, and I was now walking into a world I wasn't sure I belonged to, where law enforcement and dangerous secrets collided, and where Anna was caught in the middle of a case I never expected to find myself involved in. The detective from the day before, Harris, was waiting for me in a small interrogation room. He looked up as I entered, his usual calm demeanor replaced with a subtle tension I hadn't seen before. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, offering a tight handshake. "Please have a seat." I did as instructed, my gaze never leaving his face. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice more strained than I intended. Harris leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "We've discovered something troubling, Mr. Caldwell," he began, his tone serious. "It's about Anna's mother." I leaned forward, my heart racing. "What about her?" I asked. "Is she—" But Harris cut me off before I could finish the sentence. "We believe her condition was caused intentionally," he said. I froze, unable to process what he was saying. "Intentionally?" I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "Are you saying she was poisoned?" Harris nodded grimly. "We have reason to believe someone within her circle might have poisoned her. And there's more. We think that the person responsible might be someone close to Anna, someone who had access to her mother and the means to carry out something like this." The words hung in the air like a suffocating fog. Anna had already been through so much, and now this horrible revelation. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. How could someone hurt a mother like that? How could anyone hurt Anna in the process? "We've been digging into her family background," Harris continued, his gaze shifting toward the door as though he expected someone to walk in at any moment. "There are a few leads, but nothing concrete yet. We're still working on piecing the puzzle together. But one thing is clear, Anna's mother was targeted. And Anna could be in danger as well." My mind raced, and my chest tightened. I had promised Anna that I would protect her, that I wouldn't let anyone hurt her. But now, the danger felt real. It wasn't just a vague fear. There was someone out there who wanted to hurt Anna, someone who had already harmed her mother. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice a little more frantic than I wanted it to be. Harris looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Right now, we need to keep Anna safe. We're going to increase protection around her, but we need your cooperation. We need you to stay vigilant and keep a low profile. If the person responsible knows Anna is being protected, they could take more extreme measures." I nodded, my mind spinning. How could I protect her? What could I do? The responsibility that had always felt like something I could manage was now growing too heavy to bear. "How do you suggest I keep her safe?" I asked, feeling a surge of helplessness. Harris met my gaze, his eyes sharp. "We'll need to keep her inside the house as much as possible for now. Make sure no one has access to her. We'll do our part, but you need to make sure she's isolated from anyone who might have ill intentions. Trust no one right now." I felt a shiver run down my spine. "You want me to keep her locked up?" I said, the words sounding more extreme than I meant. Harris shook his head. "No, not locked up. Just cautious. This person is still out there, and they could be watching. Anna can't know about any of this for now. The last thing we need is for her to be frightened further." I nodded, though the weight of the request felt unbearable. How could I keep Anna safe while keeping the truth from her? She already had so much to carry. She had already learned how to distrust the world. I couldn't add more to that. "I'll do what I can," I said, my voice low. Harris stood up, signaling the end of our meeting. "I'll be in touch as soon as we have more information. Keep your phone on. If anything happens, don't hesitate to reach out." I nodded and stood up as well, my mind a swirl of thoughts. As I walked out of the precinct, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. I had no idea how I was supposed to keep Anna safe, but I knew I couldn't fail her. I couldn't let her down again. I had made her a promise, and I would see it through. When I got back home, Anna was sitting in the living room, her face hidden behind her hair, her shoulders hunched. The look on her face told me she was still struggling with everything that had happened. The visit from the social worker, the questions, the feeling that her life was spiraling out of control. She looked up as I walked in, her eyes searching my face for answers, but I didn't have any. "Everything's fine," I said, my voice softer than usual. "They're just doing their job." Anna didn't look convinced. She didn't say anything, just nodded slowly. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked, taking a seat beside her. She hesitated before finally speaking, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm scared, Mr. Caldwell. What's going to happen to me?" My heart broke hearing her say that. How could I tell her that I didn't have all the answers, that I was just as scared as she was? "I'm not going to let anything happen to you, Anna," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm going to keep you safe. I promised." She looked at me then, her eyes searching my face for the truth. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing I knew for sure. I would keep fighting for her. I would keep my promise, no matter what. And together, we would get through this. I woke up with a tight feeling in my chest, something that had been building up for days now. I had promised Anna that I would protect her, but each new piece of information that came in made it feel like I was losing control. The threat was real, and I couldn't deny it anymore. I had to keep her safe, and not just from the people who might have harmed her mother, but from the truth that was closing in around us. The weight of everything was starting to feel unbearable. I had made Anna a promise, but the more I learned, the more I realized how fragile that promise was. I had spent so many years building a life for myself, keeping everything locked away in neat little boxes, never letting anyone get too close. But Anna had shattered all of that. And as much as I had wanted to protect her, I was now more afraid than ever that I might not be able to. That night, after everything settled, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone, unable to make the call I knew I had to. I had been avoiding it, hoping the situation would fix itself, but I knew deep down it wouldn't. I had to face it. I had to face the truth about Anna's mother. I finally hit dial, the number I'd been holding off calling. "Mr. Caldwell," the voice on the other end said, cold and professional. "Detective Harris. We need to talk." My heart dropped into my stomach. "What is it?" I asked, my voice tight. "I don't have time to explain over the phone," Harris said. "But I need you to meet me. It's important." I didn't hesitate. I stood up, grabbing my coat and heading out the door, my mind a blur of worry. I had to know what was happening. I had to make sure Anna was safe. I arrived at the police station just as the sun was setting, the cold air biting at my skin as I stepped out of the car. Harris was already waiting inside, his face grim. He didn't waste any time. "We've got a lead," he said, his voice low. "A strong lead. But it's not good news." "What do you mean?" I asked, my chest tightening. Harris hesitated for a moment before answering. "We believe someone within. Anna's family is directly involved in her mother's condition," he said. "And it goes deeper than we thought." The words hit me like a slap in the face. I felt the ground shift beneath me. "You're saying it wasn't just the illness?" I asked, barely able to wrap my head around it. "No," Harris replied. "We have reason to believe her mother was deliberately poisoned, Mr. Caldwell. And we think the person who did it might be closer to Anna than we originally thought." The world seemed to stop for a moment, the shock of his words hitting me like a wave. "Who?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Who would do this?" Harris's expression remained unreadable. "We're not sure yet," he said. "But we're looking at the people closest to Anna's mother. We're still gathering evidence, but we think we're getting closer to the truth." I felt a chill spread through me. The last thing I wanted was for Anna to be involved in something like this. She was just a kid. She didn't deserve this. "What about Anna?" I asked, my voice breaking slightly. "What do we do now?" Harris looked at me, his eyes steady. "We need to keep her close. We can't let her out of our sight right now. The person responsible might come after her." My stomach churned at the thought. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't let anything happen to her. "I won't let her out of my sight," I said, my voice firm. "I'll keep her safe." Harris nodded. "That's what I need from you, Mr. Caldwell. We'll do our part, but we need you to keep her protected. The closer we get to the truth, the more dangerous things might get." I felt the weight of the situation settle heavily on my shoulders. This wasn't just about taking care of Anna anymore. This was about keeping her alive, keeping her safe from someone who had already hurt her family. "I can do that," I said, my voice low. "I'll keep her safe, no matter what." As I left the precinct, my mind was racing. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. Anna's mother, poisoned? And the person responsible could be someone in her own family? It didn't make sense. The more I thought about it, the more questions I had. Who would want to hurt Anna's mother? Why would they do it? And what did this mean for Anna? When I got home, the house was quiet. I walked inside, my heart heavy, and found Anna sitting in the living room, her eyes staring blankly at the wall. She looked so small, so fragile, that it broke my heart. She didn't look up when I entered. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. Anna, I finally asked, my voice soft. She didn't respond at first. She just sat there, her hands folded in her lap. How are you doing? I asked, trying to break the silence. She glanced up at me, her eyes empty, her face pale. I don't know what's happening, she whispered. I just want everything to go back to normal. I sat down beside her, my heart aching. I know, Anna, I said quietly. I know. I didn't have any answers for her. I didn't know what the future held. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her face this alone. I wasn't going to let anyone take her from me. I had made her a promise, and I intended to keep it. As the days passed, I kept Anna close, trying to shield her from the storm that was closing in. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the reality of the situation. The more we uncovered, the more I realized just how deep the danger was. And in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time. I had to find the person responsible. I had to protect Anna, and I had to do it before it was too late. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the untouched cup of coffee in front of me. The days since Anna had moved in had been filled with endless worry and uncertainty. I had promised her that I would protect her, that I would keep her safe from everything that was happening. But no matter how much I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were heading towards something far worse than I had anticipated. The phone call I had received earlier that morning had done nothing to calm my nerves. The detective, Harris, had called to inform me that they had finally tracked down the source of the poisoning, but the news was far from what I had hoped for. The person responsible for Anna's mother's condition wasn't a stranger. It was someone who had been in their lives all along. I still couldn't believe it. I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that the person who had caused so much pain was someone Anna had trusted. As I sat there, my mind racing, I heard footsteps coming down the hall. Anna appeared in the doorway, her eyes still carrying the weight of everything she had been through. She had been quiet all day, lost in her own thoughts, her usual spark gone. She looked at me, but didn't speak. I could see that she was waiting for something, maybe an explanation, but I didn't have one to give her. I couldn't tell her the whole truth, not yet. Anna, I said quietly, trying to break the silence. How are you doing? She shrugged, her eyes downcast. I'm fine, she whispered. But the way she said it, the way her shoulders slumped, told me she wasn't. She wasn't fine. I knew that. We're going to get through this, I said, trying to sound more certain than I felt. I'm not going to let anyone hurt you, Anna. Not now, not ever. She looked up at me, and I could see the flicker of hope in her eyes. But it was faint, almost as if she didn't believe it herself. I hated seeing her like this, broken, uncertain, unsure of who to trust. She deserved better. I could see that she was still struggling to understand the reality of everything that had happened, and I couldn't blame her. How could she process the betrayal of someone so close to her? I know it's hard, I continued, my voice softening. But you're safe here. You're with me now, and I'm not going anywhere. Anna took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling with the effort. I don't want to be scared anymore, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The vulnerability in her words struck me. I had to do something to give her back her sense of security, to show her that she didn't have to face this alone. I stood up and walked over to her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. You won't have to be scared anymore, I promise, I said, my voice steady. I'll protect you, no matter what it takes. She nodded slowly, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. She wasn't sure if she could believe me, and I didn't blame her. She had been let down so many times before. You know, when I was a kid, I used to be scared of everything, I said, trying to lighten the mood a little. Monsters under the bed, thunderstorms, even the dark. But my mom used to tell me that if you face your fears head on, they'll lose their power over you. Anna looked up at me, a small frown forming on her face. Do you really think it works? She asked quietly. I smiled, though it didn't quite reach my eyes. I think it's worth trying, I said. I think facing your fears makes you stronger. She was quiet for a moment, processing my words. And for the first time in days, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was just a small spark of trust, but I felt a shift. She wasn't completely closed off anymore. I don't know if I can be brave, she said, her voice small, but there was a hint of determination in it. But I want to try. I don't want to keep running away from things. I squeezed her shoulder gently. You don't have to do it all at once. Just take it one step at a time. And know that I'm here with you. Every step of the way. The sound of my phone buzzing broke the moment, and I glanced down to see a message from Detective Harris. I had been expecting this. They had found something. I have to go, I said, my voice turning serious. But we'll talk more later. Okay. Anna nodded, though I could see the uncertainty still lingering in her eyes. I reached out and gently lifted her chin, forcing her to meet my gaze. I'm not leaving you, I said, my voice steady. I'll always be here. You're safe. She smiled a little, and it was the first real smile I had seen from her in days. It wasn't much, but it was enough. As I walked to the door, I paused, looking back at her one last time. We're in this together, I said, my voice soft but firm. Anna nodded, and this time, I saw the smallest glimmer of belief in her eyes. It was the first sign that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. I walked out of the house, the weight of the situation still pressing down on me. The detective's message was clear. It was time to confront the truth. The person who had hurt Anna's mother, and Anna, was closer than we thought. And now, it was up to me to make sure they didn't get away with it. I couldn't protect Anna from the truth, but I could keep her safe from the danger that was still out there. That was the least I could do for her. As I stepped into the car and drove off, my mind was set. I was going to find out who was responsible, and I was going to make them pay. For Anna, for her mother, and for the chance to finally give Anna the life she deserved. I could feel the weight of the world on my shoulders as I drove through the night, the city lights blurring by. The message from Detective Harris had left my mind reeling. The new lead was not just a breakthrough, it was a game changer. Whoever was behind this, whoever had hurt Anna's mother and put Anna in this position, was someone I never imagined. I had always thought I could protect her, but now, the danger felt far more personal than I had anticipated. It wasn't just some stranger in the shadows. It was someone close to her. Someone who had access to her life, to her mother's life. The realization had hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe it. But the evidence didn't lie. And now, it was time to confront the truth, to face the person who had shattered Anna's world. I parked the car outside the address Harris had given me. It was an unassuming building in a quiet part of town, but the sense of unease that gripped me told me everything I needed to know. This was it. This was the moment that would change everything. I walked up to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The air around me felt heavy, like a storm was brewing. I knocked twice, each sound echoing in the silence, then stood there, waiting. After a long moment, the door creaked open, and a man stood before me. He was tall, dressed in a dark suit, his face unreadable. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. Mr. Caldwell, he said, his voice smooth but carrying an undertone of authority. Come in. We've been expecting you. I stepped inside, trying to mask the tightness in my chest. I had no idea what to expect, but I wasn't going to back down. Not now. What is this about? I asked, my voice steady, but my heart was racing. The man gestured for me to sit, and I did, my eyes scanning the room. It was sparsely furnished, but there was an overwhelming sense of power in the space. It felt cold, impersonal, like the kind of place where deals were made, and people's lives were nothing more than pawns in a larger game. You've been looking for answers, the man said, sitting across from me, his eyes narrowing. But you don't know what you're up against, Mr. Caldwell. Not really. Who are you? I asked, the frustration in my voice rising. I'm someone who knows the truth, he replied, his voice low and steady. And someone who can help you understand it. If you're willing to listen. I clenched my fists, trying to hold back my anger. I'm done with games. Just tell me what you know. I'm not here to waste time. The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I know who's behind Anna's mother's condition, he said, his voice almost mocking. I know who's been pulling the strings. I leaned forward, my pulse quickening. Who? I asked, barely able to control my breath. Who's responsible? The man paused, as if savoring the moment. It's someone you trust, Mr. Caldwell. Someone close to you. Someone who has been part of your life for a long time. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? I whispered. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving me. You really don't see it, do you? You've been so focused on the obvious, so caught up in your search for answers, that you've missed the one person who's been right under your nose. I could feel the walls closing in around me. My mind raced, but I couldn't make sense of what he was saying. Who? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Your own family, Mr. Caldwell, he said, his voice cutting through. The tension. Your own blood. Someone you've trusted for years. My stomach dropped. The room seemed to spin around me. This wasn't possible. It couldn't be. I trusted my family. They had always been there for me. But now, the possibility that someone in my own life was behind all of this was almost too much to bear. No, I said, shaking my head, trying to reject the thought. It can't be. The man didn't respond right away. Instead, he stood up and walked to a cabinet in the corner of the room. He opened it, retrieving a file from inside. He placed it on the table in front of me. This is everything you need to know, he said, sliding the file toward me. The truth. The whole truth. My hands shook as I opened the file, the weight of what was about to be revealed sinking in. Inside were documents, photos, and reports. The evidence was right there in front of me. It was too much to take in. But the name at the top of one of the reports caught my eye. It was a name I recognized, a name I never thought would be linked to anything like this. My family. My own flesh and blood. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The person responsible for everything that had happened, for the pain Anna had gone through, for the poisoning, was someone I had trusted for years. Someone I had called family. I slammed the file shut, my heart racing, my mind reeling. This can't be true, I said, my voice shaking. I don't believe it. The man just looked at me, his expression hard. It's true, Mr. Caldwell, he said. And now, you have a choice. You can ignore it, pretend it doesn't matter. Or you can do something about it. My mind was spinning. I couldn't process it. How could I confront someone I loved, someone I had known my whole life, with something like this? But deep down, I knew I had no choice. Anna's safety, her future, was on the line. And I wasn't going to let anyone hurt her. Not even my own family. What do I do now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The man gave me a cold smile. Now, Mr. Caldwell, you do what needs to be done. I sat in the car, my knuckles white as I gripped the steering wheel, trying to steady my breath. The file that Detective Harris had given me was now burned into my mind. The truth was finally out there, and I had no choice but to face it. It was hard to accept, to think that someone so close to me, someone I had trusted, was responsible for everything that had happened to Anna, for the pain, the fear, the suffering she had gone through. And yet, the evidence was clear. The reports, the documents, the photos, all pointing back to my own family. The person I had once believed would never hurt me, let alone someone like Anna, was at the center of this. I couldn't shake the image of that name at the top of the report. It seemed surreal, like it couldn't be real. But it was. The worst part was, I had seen the signs all along, had ignored them, convinced myself that things would work themselves out. But now, there was no turning back. Anna was at risk, and I had to protect her. I had to make things right. I glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing the reflection of the mansion looming in the distance. It had once felt like a home, a sanctuary. But now, it felt like a prison, and Anna was its prisoner. I couldn't let her stay there, not with the danger closing in. I had to make a plan, and I had to do it fast. I pulled up to the house, my thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and determination. The first thing I needed to do was make sure Anna was safe. I didn't know who I could trust anymore, not even in my own family. I had to act alone. When I stepped inside, the silence in the house felt suffocating. Anna was sitting in the living room, her eyes fixed on the TV, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her shirt. She was still carrying the weight of everything that had happened, still trying to make sense of it all. She didn't look up when I entered, but I knew she could feel me there, could feel the change in the air. Anna, I said softly, my voice carrying the weight of everything I was feeling. She turned toward me, her eyes wide and searching, like she was waiting for me to explain what was happening. What's going on? She asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. I paused, trying to find the right words, but the truth was hard to say out loud. I need you to trust me, I said finally, my voice firm. I'm going to get you out of here. It's not safe anymore. Anna blinked in confusion, her brow furrowed. What do you mean? What's happening? I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. There's someone in my family who has been causing all of this, I said, my voice steady but filled with frustration. They've been hurting your mom, and now they're after you. Her eyes widened, the fear in them more evident than ever. Who? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Who's trying to hurt me? I felt my heart break at the fear in her voice. I don't have all the answers yet, but I know we're not safe here, I said. I'm going to make sure you're protected. I promise. She nodded slowly, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes. She was scared, and I couldn't blame her. This was a lot for anyone to handle, let alone a young girl who had already been through so much. But where will we go? She asked, her voice quiet. I don't know yet, I said honestly, but I'll figure it out. I won't let anything happen to you. Anna stood up, her face a mixture of confusion and fear. I don't want to leave, she said, her voice small. I don't want to go anywhere. I just want everything to be normal again. I know, I said softly, walking toward her. But sometimes, when things aren't safe, we have to make hard decisions. You've been through so much already, and I won't let anyone hurt you again. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with uncertainty. For a long moment, we just stood there, locked in a silent understanding. I could see the walls she had built around herself starting to crack, just a little. I'm scared, she whispered. I don't know what to do. I know, I said, my voice gentle but firm. I'm scared too, but we're going to do this together. You're not alone, Anna. I won't let anyone take you from me. She didn't say anything more, but I could see the faintest hint of trust in her eyes. She was still scared, still unsure, but I could tell she was starting to believe in me. That was all I needed to keep going. I grabbed my phone and texted Harris, letting him know we were leaving the house and would be staying somewhere safe. I didn't know where we would go yet, but I knew we couldn't stay here, not with the threat looming over us. Anna was in danger, and I would do whatever it took to keep her safe. As I packed a few essentials, Anna sat quietly on the couch, watching me. She didn't ask any more questions, didn't say anything. She just watched, her eyes filled with the weight of everything that had happened. Once I was finished, I turned to her. Let's go, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Anna stood up slowly, her eyes never leaving me. She nodded, as if she understood the gravity of the situation, even though she was still just a child. She wasn't ready for this, but I wasn't going to let her face it alone. Together, we could get through anything. As we walked out the door, I felt a mix of fear and determination rise within me. This was only the beginning. We had a long road ahead, but as long as we stuck together, I knew we could make it through. And no matter who stood in our way, I would protect her. I would keep her safe. We were in this together, and nothing could change that. I watched Anna as she sat on the couch, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her eyes were distant, lost in thought, but there was something different about her now. The walls she had built around herself were starting to crack. I could see the trust slowly growing between us, the smallest glimmer of belief that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. But it was still fragile, like a thread waiting to snap. I had told her that we were in this together, that I would protect her no matter what. But now the reality of the situation was settling in. We weren't safe here anymore. The danger was getting closer, and it was only a matter of time before whoever was behind all of this made their move. The feeling of fear was constant now, lingering like a shadow in every corner of the house. And I could see it in Anna's eyes too. The uncertainty, the fear of what would come next. I sat down beside her, trying to keep my expression calm, but the truth was I didn't know what to do next. The last few days had been a blur. Moving Anna out of the house, the quiet trip to the temporary shelter, trying to keep her calm while we waited for things to settle. But nothing was settling. Everything felt like it was about to fall apart. I took a deep breath, trying to push away the anxiety clawing at my chest. Anna, I said softly, we're going to get through this, okay? I promised I'd keep you safe, and I meant it. You're not alone in this. She didn't answer at first. She just nodded, her eyes still a little cloudy. I wasn't sure if she was truly hearing me, or if she was just too tired to respond. The last few days had drained both of us. I know you're scared, I continued, but I'm not going anywhere. We're going to stay one step ahead. We'll figure this out. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time in days, I saw the smallest spark of hope in her eyes. It was faint, almost too subtle to notice, but it was there. That was all I needed. I couldn't promise that everything would be perfect, I couldn't promise that the people who had hurt her and her mother would be brought to justice right away. But I could promise that we would face it together. That I would be there every step of the way. Just then, my phone rang, pulling me away from the moment. I reached for it, glancing at the screen. It was Detective Harris. My stomach tightened at the sight of his name. "Mr. Caldwell," he said when I answered. "We've got a lead." My heart started racing. I wasn't sure if this was good news or bad news, but I couldn't afford to be anything but focused. "What kind of lead?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "We're closing in on the person responsible," Harris said, his voice serious. "But there's something else. We believe this person might be closer to Anna than we thought. We've uncovered some new information. It could be bigger than we imagined." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" I asked, feeling the weight of his words. "We're not sure yet," Harris replied. "But we need to meet. There are some things I need to discuss with you in person." I agreed to meet him at the precinct, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. Could this be it? Was this finally the breakthrough we'd been waiting for? Or was this just another dead end? I didn't know, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that we were getting closer to the truth. Closer to the person who had done this to Anna and her mother. When I arrived at the precinct, Harris was waiting for me in a small room, the door closed behind him. I could see it in his eyes, the same tension I had felt for days. He didn't waste any time. "We've narrowed down the suspects," he said, his voice low and urgent. "And we've got a name." My heart skipped a beat. "Who?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Harris looked at me, his face grim. "It's someone in your family, Mr. Caldwell. Someone who's been involved in Anna's life for a long time." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was saying. My family. This couldn't be. But the look in Harris's eyes told me he wasn't joking. "Who is it?" I asked again, my voice rising with a mix of disbelief and anger. Harris hesitated for a moment before responding. "It's your brother, Mr. Caldwell. We've traced the connection. We think he's the one behind all of this." My blood ran cold. My brother? I couldn't process what I was hearing. My brother, the one I had known my entire life, the one I had trusted. He was behind this? It didn't make sense. "Are you sure?" I asked, barely able to get the words out. Harris nodded. "We're still gathering evidence, but the pieces are falling into place. Your brother has been involved with Anna's mother in ways that go beyond just family. We believe he's the one who poisoned her." The room felt like it was closing in on me. My mind couldn't keep up. My brother was involved? No, this couldn't be true. He was family. But as the pieces of the puzzle came together, I knew Harris was right. My brother had been involved in Anna's mother's life more than I realized. And now, he had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. I stood up abruptly, my hands trembling with a mix of anger and confusion. "How do we stop him?" I asked, my voice rough. Harris looked at me, his face hard. "We have to be careful. If we confront him now, we risk tipping him off. We need to get the evidence first. We need to make sure we have enough to put him away for good." My heart was pounding in my chest. I had to protect Anna. She couldn't go back to that life. Not now. Not ever. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said, my voice fierce. "We can't let him hurt her again." Harris nodded, his expression somber. "We're going to take him down, Mr. Caldwell. But we need to move carefully." As I left the precinct, the weight of what I had learned hung heavy on me. My brother was the one responsible. And now, I had to stop him before he could hurt Anna again. I didn't know how, but I knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't let him get away with it. Not now. Not ever. I couldn't shake the weight of the situation as I drove back to the house. The truth was inescapable now. My brother. The one person I had trusted more than anyone else. The person I thought I knew better than anyone. He was the one behind all of this. The betrayal stung more than anything I had ever experienced in my life. How could he do this to Anna? To me? How could someone so close be the one to tear everything apart? My heart raced with frustration as the car tires hummed against the road, the heavy silence between us suffocating. Anna sat quietly in the passenger seat, her gaze distant as she stared out the window. I could feel her tension in the air, a nervous energy that mirrored my own. She didn't need to know everything. Not yet, but the fear was growing inside of me, a gnawing feeling that things were spiraling further out of control. When I pulled up to the house, I looked over at her. She was sitting perfectly still, her shoulders slumped. I had tried so hard to keep her safe, but the walls were closing in, and I couldn't protect her from everything. Not from this. Not from what was coming. I stepped out of the car and walked to the door, trying to steady my breath. Anna followed me inside, her eyes scanning the familiar surroundings, but I could tell she was uneasy. I tried to act like everything was okay, but I knew she could sense something wasn't right. "It's going to be okay, Anna," I said, even though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. "We're going to take care of everything." She nodded, but the uncertainty in her eyes didn't fade. She had been through so much already. She had lost so much. And now, she was stuck in the middle of something bigger than either of us. "What's going to happen now?" she asked, her voice small. I wanted to give her an answer. I wanted to make everything better for her. But the truth was, I didn't know. I didn't know what was coming, or what I was supposed to do next. All I knew was that I had to protect her. "I don't have all the answers," I said quietly, sitting down beside her. "But we'll get through this together. I promise you." The doorbell rang suddenly, breaking the fragile silence between us. I stood up, the tension tightening in my chest. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the door, my mind racing, wondering if this was the moment everything would change. I opened it cautiously, and there stood Detective Harris. His face was serious, his eyes scanning the room behind me. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, his voice low. "We need to talk." I motioned for him to come in, my mind spinning with questions. He stepped inside, and I shut the door behind him, closing off the rest of the world. "What is it?" I asked, my voice tight. Harris looked over at Anna, who was sitting on the couch, her expression unreadable. "We have some new developments," he said, his voice even more serious than usual. "But we need to act fast. It's about your brother." The room seemed to freeze. I couldn't breathe. The thought of my brother being involved in this, in everything that had happened to Anna, still didn't seem real. I had never imagined he could be the one behind it all. "What about him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We have him," Harris said, his voice low. "We've been tracking him for the last few days, and we finally have enough evidence to charge him. He's been involved in a conspiracy to poison Anna's mother, and we believe he was planning to come after Anna next." My chest tightened. It was worse than I had feared. I thought I had known the danger, but now I understood just how deep the betrayal went. "You're sure?" I asked, my voice shaky. Harris nodded. "We're sure. We've got the proof." I felt like I was drowning, the weight of everything pressing in on me. How could I face him? How could I confront the person I had grown up with, the one who knew me better than anyone else? And how could I explain to Anna that the one person I had trusted was the one who had hurt her? "What happens now?" I asked, my voice hollow. "We need to get him before he can do any more damage," Harris said, his tone firm. "We've already contacted the authorities, and they'll be ready to arrest him as soon as we make the move. We need to act quickly. If we give him any more time, he could disappear, and we'll lose him for good." I nodded, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and rage. I wasn't sure how I felt anymore. My brother had always been a part of my life, but now I had to turn him in. I had to protect Anna from him, no matter what it cost. "What do you need from me?" I asked, my voice steely with determination. "We need you to stay close to Anna," Harris said. "We're putting extra security in place, but we need to make sure she stays out of harm's way. If he tries to make a move, we can't let him get to her." "I won't let him get to her," I said, my voice hard. "I'm not going to let him hurt her. Not now. Not ever." Harris gave a small nod, and I could see the understanding in his eyes. He knew what this meant. He knew how hard this was for me. "We'll move in tonight," he said. "We'll keep you updated, but for now, just stay inside. Make sure Anna is safe." I nodded, my resolve hardening. "I'll do whatever it takes." Harris turned to leave, but before he went, he paused and looked back at me. "You're doing the right thing," he said quietly. "This is the only way to keep her safe." I didn't answer him right away. Instead, I turned back to Anna, who had been quietly watching us from the couch. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. I walked over to her, kneeling down in front of her. "We're going to be okay," I said softly. "I'm going to make sure of it." She looked at me, her eyes searching for reassurance. "You're not going to let him hurt me, right?" she asked, her voice trembling. I reached out and gently took her hand, squeezing it tightly. "I'll protect you, Anna. I promise." She nodded slowly, her trust in me clear, even though I knew she was still afraid. Together, we would get through this. Together, we would face whatever came next. And no matter what happened, I would never let her face it alone. I didn't know what to expect as I sat in the living room with Anna, the silence between us thick and heavy. We had spent the last few days in a state of constant uncertainty, moving from one piece of bad news to the next, but tonight felt different. Something had changed in the air, and it wasn't just the fear that had been hanging over us for days. It was more than that. It was the realization that we were almost there, almost to the point where we could finally put an end to this, to the nightmare that had taken over both of our lives. But the closer we got to the truth, the more the fear crept in. I could see it in Anna's eyes, too. The same worry that had been bubbling under the surface for so long. The truth was almost in our hands, but that only made the situation feel more dangerous. Do you think it will be over soon? Anna asked, her voice barely above a whisper, the fear in her eyes betraying the calm facade she was trying to put up. I could feel her looking to me for reassurance, but I didn't have any good answers. I had no idea when or how this would end, but I knew. One thing for sure, I was going to make sure she was safe, no matter what. I stood up, pacing the room for a moment, trying to think. Everything felt like it was about to explode. Every time we thought we were one step closer to the truth, the danger seemed to grow even more imminent. The people behind this, whoever they were, weren't going to give up easily. And I knew we were running out of time. I walked back to Anna, sitting down next to her. I don't know, Anna, I said softly, but we're going to face this together. And no matter what happens, I won't let anything happen to you. She nodded slowly, but the fear in her eyes didn't go away. She was still just a child, a young girl who had been through more than anyone her age should have to. But she was stronger than she realized. And for the first time, I saw the faintest flicker of trust in her gaze. Maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe that we could get through this. Just then, my phone rang, breaking the silence. I glanced at the screen and saw Detective Harris's name. My stomach twisted. I answered quickly. Mr. Caldwell. Harris's voice was firm, but there was an edge of urgency in it. We need to move. We've got a clear shot at your brother. He's planning something tonight. My heart stopped. What do you mean? I asked, the words choking in my throat. We're sure he's involved, Harris said. He's been meeting with people we've been tracking. It looks like he's preparing to make his move. We need to act fast before he does something drastic. I felt the ground shift beneath me. My brother. The person I had trusted my entire life. He was the one behind all of this. The betrayal was unbearable, but now was not the time to think about that. It was time to act. Where is he? I asked, my voice hard with determination. He's holed up in a location not far from you, Harris said. We're ready to move in, but we need you to stay close to Anna. We can't risk him knowing we're onto him. We'll take care of the rest, but you need to keep her safe. Understand? I nodded, the panic rising in my chest, but I couldn't let it show. I understand. I'll stay with her, but I need to know what's going to happen. I can't sit here and wait. Harris paused for a moment, as if weighing his words. We'll do everything we can, but it's going to get dangerous. We're hoping to catch him before he makes his move. Stay calm, Mr. Caldwell. We're in this together. I hung up the phone, the weight of his words sinking in. Anna was still sitting on the couch, watching me closely. I could see the worry in her eyes. She knew something was coming. What's happening? She asked, her voice small, as if she were afraid of the answer. I sat down next to her again, taking her hand in mine. We're going to be okay, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. They're going after my brother. We're going to stop him. Anna's eyes widened, and I could see the fear flash across her face. I knew she was scared, and I hated that I couldn't promise her that everything would be fine. But I wasn't going to lie to her. I had to make sure she knew the truth. Is it really him? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. It's him, I said, my voice tight. But we're going to stop him. I won't let him hurt you. Not now. Not ever. She nodded slowly, but I could see the uncertainty still in her eyes. I pulled her into a hug, holding her close, trying to protect her from the storm that was about to hit. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew we were at the edge of something huge. This was the moment where everything would either fall apart or come together. And I wasn't going to let it fall apart. As we sat there, the sound of sirens filled the air outside. I looked out the window and saw the flashing lights reflecting off the snow. The time had come. I stood up, taking a deep breath. It's time, I said, turning to Anna. I need you to stay here. Stay hidden, and don't come out until I come back. Understand? Anna nodded again, her face pale but determined. I understand, she said, her voice stronger now. I gave her one last reassuring look before walking toward the door. I didn't know if I was doing The right thing. I didn't know if I was strong enough to stop what was coming, but I knew I had to try. For Anna. For everything we had been through together. I wasn't going to let my brother win. I wasn't going to let him hurt anyone else. Not anymore. I walked out of the house, my heart pounding in my chest. The lights of the police cars flashing outside illuminated the quiet street, but all I could focus on was the final confrontation ahead. Harris had said we were going after my brother, and I knew that once we moved, there would be no going back. I had always thought I knew the man I grew up with, but now, every step forward felt like I was walking into unknown territory. This wasn't just about protecting Anna anymore. It was about facing the truth, about doing what was necessary to put an end to the nightmare my family had created. I had kept Anna safe so far, but I knew that this final step would determine everything. It wasn't just about getting justice for her mother anymore. It was about ensuring Anna's future, the future that had been stolen from her. The plan was simple. Harris and his team would move in, and I would stay back with Anna, keeping her out of sight until we had everything under control. The streets were eerily quiet as I walked to the car, each footstep heavy with the burden of what I was about to face. Anna was inside, safe, hidden from the storm that was about to hit. She had no idea how close we were to the end, and for now, I wanted to keep it that way. I had made a promise to her, one I intended to keep. The car engine roared to life as I started it, and drove away from the house. The air felt thick with tension, every moment feeling like it was building up to something big. When I reached the meeting point, I saw Harris standing with his team, all of them poised and ready to move. My stomach churned with a mix of fear and anger, but there was no turning back now. "We're set," Harris said, his voice steady. "We've got eyes on him, but we need to be careful. He's not going to go down easy." I nodded, my jaw clenched. "Let's do this," I said, my voice unwavering despite the fear gnawing at me. Harris looked at me, his eyes filled with something close to sympathy. "Just remember, Mr. Caldwell, this is it. Once we move, there's no turning back. We'll have him, but it's going to get messy." I glanced at Anna's house one last time. I couldn't stop thinking about her, how innocent she was, how she didn't deserve any of this. "I know," I replied, my voice tight. "Let's finish this." We moved quickly, the team working with a precision that only years of training could produce. Every move was calculated, every corner watched, as we closed in on the location. It wasn't long before we arrived at the building where my brother was holed up, the last place I ever expected to find myself, standing on the other side of the law from him. He was the one who had caused this pain, the one who had hurt Anna and her mother, the one who had tried to tear our family apart. The betrayal stung more than anything. I had trusted him with everything, my family, my life, my past. And now, everything was crumbling, piece by piece. "This is it," Harris said, his voice low. "Get ready." The team spread out, positioning themselves around the building as I stood in the shadows, trying to steady my breathing. My mind raced, every worst-case scenario flashing through my thoughts. I couldn't stop thinking about Anna. I couldn't let her down now. This was our only chance. The next few minutes felt like hours, every second stretching longer than the last. Then, the signal came. The team had breached the building. I held my breath as I watched them move in, the air thick with tension. I wasn't sure what I expected, but I couldn't look away. The footsteps grew louder, and then the sound of voices, low, urgent, reached my ears. My brother was in there. Somewhere. "Move in," Harris ordered. The team swarmed the building, their movements quick and precise. I stayed behind, watching, waiting. The sound of muffled shouting reached my ears, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. This was my family we were talking about. But then the reality set in. My brother had crossed a line. He had hurt Anna. He had hurt someone who had trusted him. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. After what felt like an eternity, Harris reappeared, his face hard but relieved. "It's done," he said, his voice low. "We've got him." I exhaled in relief, the weight in my chest finally lifting. But the victory didn't feel as sweet as I thought it would. My brother was going to face the consequences for what he had done, but it didn't change the fact that he had betrayed me, that he had hurt Anna. "Where is he?" I asked, my voice tight. "He's in custody," Harris replied. "We'll get him processed. He won't be able to hurt anyone else." I nodded, my mind still reeling from the shock of everything. It was over, but Anna's world was still broken. I had taken the steps to protect her, but the scars would take time to heal. I knew this wasn't the end. There was still so much more to be done. But for now, for this moment, we had won. Anna was safe. And that's all that mattered. I drove back to the house, my mind still processing everything that had happened. The house felt quiet, almost empty, when I stepped inside. But then I saw Anna sitting in the living room, looking out the window. Her face was soft, less guarded than it had been before. She didn't look at me when I walked in, but I could feel the change in the air. She knew. She knew we had won. She knew she was safe. "It's over," I said softly, my voice breaking the silence. Anna turned to me, her eyes searching my face, as if to make sure it was true. "Is it really over?" she asked, her voice small. I walked over to her, kneeling in front of her. "It's over," I repeated, my voice firm. "We're safe now." She finally smiled, a small but genuine smile that reached her eyes. And in that moment, I realized that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. We still had a long road ahead of us, but we would face it together. And no matter what happened, I wouldn't let anyone take her from me. She was safe, and that was all that mattered.